He stood at his wife's grave, broken and alone, until he saw a little girl crying beside it, calling the woman Mommy. That moment shattered everything he thought he knew, because the girl had her mother's eyes, and a secret that could destroy them all. What he chose to do next would change their lives forever. If this is not just a story, it's a piece of someone's hidden pain, quietly waiting to be heard. In today's story, we dive into a moment that can change everything, in the most unexpected way. Before we begin, where are you listening from? Canada, the US, Norway? Let us know in the comments, because stories may begin anywhere, but they connect us all. Stay with us until the very end, because sometimes, what breaks your heart can also heal it. And if you believe stories can change lives, hit subscribe. Join our journey. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment. Your voice matters here. It was a quiet November afternoon, the kind that draped the world in muted gray. Autumn's last breath clung to the barren trees, their skeletal fingers swaying gently in the cold breeze. The old cemetery on the hill had an eerie calmness, where grief seemed to live in the stones, and time moved differently, slower, heavier. Leonard Whitmore stood alone by his wife's grave, his wool coat shielding him from the chill, though nothing could shield his heart. The polished granite stone bore her name, Amelia Rose Whitmore, beloved wife, compassionate soul, 1976-2023. Her death was sudden, a stroke in her sleep, no goodbyes, no warning, just silence in a hole that swallowed the light from his world. Leonard had built empires, turned fledgling ideas into billion-dollar ventures. He owned skyscrapers, software firms, and properties from London to Tokyo. But all of it meant nothing in the shadow of Amelia's absence. She had been the only person who truly saw the man behind the fortune. The orphan boy with a chipped heart, too afraid to be loved. Now 2 years later, he visited her grave every Sunday. He never missed it, not once. But this Sunday was different. As he approached the small fenced enclosure where Amelia lay, he saw something that made him freeze. A little girl, no more than 6 or 7, sat in front of the grave, his wife's grave, her tiny shoulders trembling with sobs. Her brown curls were tangled, her dress thin for the weather, and her shoes soaked in mud. But it was her eyes, wide and wounded, that struck Leonard. They held the same gentle warmth Amelia's once did. He watched her silently for a moment, unsure if he was intruding or hallucinating. Who was she? Why was she here? He cleared his throat and stepped closer. She looked up at him, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "This is my mommy's grave," she said softly. Leonard's breath caught. "No," he replied, confusion furrowing his brow. "This grave belongs to my wife." But the girl shook her head, tears clinging to her lashes. "She's my mommy. Her name was Amelia. She used to sing to me before bed." The world shifted beneath Leonard's feet, and in that instant, nothing made sense anymore. But what she said next changed everything. Leonard stared at the little girl, rooted to the spot as if his polished shoes had grown roots in the frozen earth. The wind brushed past them, tossing her curls gently as if nature itself dared not disturb the silence between them. The girl sniffled, brushing her small fingers across the edge of the gravestone. She used to wear a necklace with a green stone. Like a leaf, but it sparkled. Leonard's pulse stuttered. He knew that necklace. A jade pendant carved like an ivy leaf. Amelia had worn it every day for 20 years. He'd had it made for her in Kyoto, during their second anniversary trip. No one outside their closest circle even knew it existed. He dropped to one knee, eye level with the girl now. "What's your name?" Her eyes dropped shyly. "Hope." "Hope what?" She hesitated. "Hope, I don't know. I don't remember the last part. Just Hope." His breath clouded in the air between them. "And where is your father?" I don't have one. Mommy used to say he was a shadow, not a real person." Her voice trembled, but there was no fear in her, only loneliness. Leonard took in her appearance again. Her dress, once pink, was faded and thin. Her coat was 2 sizes too small, and her hands were red from the cold. No child should be in a cemetery alone. Not like this, he swallowed. "Where did you come from, Hope? Who brought you here?" She pointed toward the wrought iron gate at the end of the gravel path. "I walked. I followed the picture. She dug into the small cloth bag slung over her shoulder and pulled out a folded photograph. Leonard took it cautiously. It was a worn, crumpled image of Amelia in her garden, smiling beside her favorite rose bush, the same photo he kept in his study drawer. He felt a sharp tremor of something ancient and painful rise in his chest. He folded the picture carefully. "Where did you get this?" Hope looked down. "I found it under my bed, and then I heard her. Mommy's voice. She told me to come here. She said you'd be here." Leonard's stomach turned. Was this some elaborate hoax, a twisted game? But how could it be? No scam artist would send a child like this. She was either deeply confused, or his mind rebelled at the idea, but his heart had begun its own quiet rebellion against logic. He stood up slowly, unsure of his next move. "Come with me," he said, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. "It's too cold to stay here." Hope took his gloved hand without hesitation. They walked in silence to his black Mercedes parked along the gravel lane. As he helped her into the passenger seat and buckled her in, Leonard's hands trembled. His car had never known messiness, but he handed her a blanket from the back seat and turned the heat up without another thought. The drive back to the Whitmore estate was quiet, save for Hope humming to herself. A tune Leonard recognized all too well. It was Amelia's lullaby, a simple melody she used to hum when she watered the orchids or made tea on rainy days. He dared not ask how the child knew it. When they pulled into the private driveway lined with old sycamores, Hope gasped. "This looks like the house in my dream." Leonard didn't respond. The Whitmore mansion stood tall and solemn in the overcast light, its stone facade almost weeping with history. Amelia had made it a home, filling it with light and music, and since her death, it had been nothing but a mausoleum of memories. Now, with Hope's tiny hand clutching his, the house suddenly felt occupied again. Mrs. Dunley, the housekeeper, met them at the door with her usual quiet dignity. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw the child. "Who's this Mr. Whitmore?" I don't know yet." Leonard admitted, his voice grave. "But she's staying the night." Mrs. Dunley said nothing, only nodded and guided Hope inside, her nurturing instincts quickly taking over. Leonard lingered by the door, staring at the empty foyer, feeling a weight pressing against his chest. He didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in fate. But tonight something had followed him home. Something soft, strange, and impossibly familiar. He climbed the stairs slowly to Amelia's old room, the one he hadn't entered since her funeral. And when he opened the door, a gust of lavender, her favorite scent, washed over him. But it wasn't the scent that made him stagger backward in shock. It was the music box on the dresser, the one that had been broken for 2 years. It was playing again. And the lullaby was the same one Hope had hummed. The gentle chime of the music box filled the room like a whisper from the past. Leonard's heart pounded in his chest, an unfamiliar fear tightening around his ribs. He hadn't heard that melody since the night Amelia died. The box had fallen from her nightstand and shattered during the chaos of paramedics rushing in. He had left it untouched, just like the rest of her room, frozen in time. He stepped inside now, his polished shoes brushing over the carpet Amelia had chosen, her favorite shade of dusky rose. Dust floated in the sunbeams that pushed their way through the heavy curtains. Everything was just as she'd left it. Her white silk robe draped across the armchair, her perfume still sitting atop the vanity, and now, the music box open and turning slowly on its own. He approached it, careful as if stepping on sacred ground. The ballerina figurine inside spun, its porcelain arms raised toward the heavens, and the lullaby, Amelia's lullaby, played sweet and slow. Leonard reached for it. Click, the lid closed in his hand. He froze. "Do you like it?" A small voice asked from behind him. He turned around. Hope stood in the doorway, wearing one of Amelia's soft knit cardigans that Mrs. Dunley must have found for her. The sleeves swallowed her hands. Her eyes scanned the room like a child searching for home. "I used to listen to that music box when Mommy brushed my hair," she said, stepping inside. She said the ballerina danced to the sound of her heart. Leonard felt a chill creep across his neck. "How do you know about this room?" Hope looked confused. "Because I've been here before." He kneeled again, trying to keep his voice calm, though something about this little girl shook him more deeply than he wanted to admit. "Hope, have you ever been in this house before today?" Or she nodded slowly. "Not for a long time. But I remember it, the blue stars on the ceiling, the blanket with birds, and the rocking chair." Leonard turned his gaze upward. Blue stars, tiny glow, and the dark stickers still clung faintly to the ceiling beams. They were nearly invisible in the daylight. He had forgotten all about them. Amelia had put them there when her niece came to visit years ago, thinking the stars would help the child sleep better in an unfamiliar room. But Hope wouldn't know that. No one would. Leonard felt like he was teetering on the edge of something impossible. This couldn't be a coincidence. Yet what explanation made sense? "Hope," he said carefully, "how long did you live with your mommy?" Where she hesitated, then held up 5 fingers. 5 birthdays. Then she went away? "And who took care of you after that?" "An old lady. She was nice but always tired. Then she went away, too. And no one came for you?" Hope looked down. "I was too quiet, I think. They didn't hear me." Leonard clenched his jaw, anger welling in his chest, not at her, but at the world. How had a child who claimed to be Amelia's daughter ended up alone, unclaimed and forgotten? He sat on the edge of the bed, the very spot where Amelia used to sip her evening tea and read poetry aloud. The mattress dipped beneath his weight. Hope climbed up beside him, her little legs swinging. "Can I stay here tonight?" His voice caught. "You want to sleep in this room?" She nodded. "It feels safe. Like Mommy's arms." He looked down at her. Those big amber eyes that shimmered when the light hit just right. They were Amelia's eyes. He had fallen in love with them once. Now they looked back at him from the face of a child. "I'll have Mrs. Dunley bring fresh sheets." he said quietly. And you can stay as long as you need. Hope smiled. She laid her head gently against his arm. And for the first time in 2 years, Leonard didn't feel alone. That night, after Hope was fast asleep in Amelia's old room, the same blanket with birds pulled to her chin, the lullaby now silent, Leonard poured himself a glass of scotch in the study. The fire crackled in the hearth, but the warmth did little to thaw the icy thoughts storming through his mind. He opened his desk drawer, pulling out a thin manila envelope labeled private. Amelia's will. He had never looked inside. The grief had been too raw, too dense, like a fog he couldn't walk through. But now, with Hope asleep upstairs, with her familiar lullaby echoing in his soul, he had to know. He slid the papers out, his fingers trembling. The first page was a letter. Handwritten. Leonard, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it also means the time has come to tell you the truth about the choice I made 7 years ago. About the daughter I never told you about. His vision blurred. The page shook in his hands. The letter trembled in Leonard's grip like a living thing. Firelight flickered across the paper, casting shadows on the trembling words. He sat alone in the vast study, the thick silence around him disturbed only by the ticking of the antique grandfather clock and the occasional pop of the burning logs. He took a long breath, then another sip of scotch, but the burn in his throat was nothing compared to the fire building in his chest. Amelia had kept a secret, a daughter. Their daughter. His eyes dropped again to the letter, Amelia's handwriting soft, flowing, the curves of each letter familiar, once traced across love notes, anniversary cards, pages of dreams. But this was different. This wasn't poetry or devotion. This was confession. Leonard, I wanted to tell you so many times. But I was afraid, not of you, but of what this truth might do to us. 7 years ago I made a choice I thought was right. I was wrong not to tell you. I know that now. But please, before you hate me, hear my heart. Her name is Hope. Leonard's fingers tightened on the edge of the paper. I gave birth to her quietly, far away in the French countryside. I told you I was taking time to care for my aunt, remember? That wasn't a lie. She did need me. But there was more. I was pregnant. And I didn't know how to tell you. We'd just come through that awful period. Your mother's death, the company crisis, the media scandal. You were drowning, Leo. I saw it in your eyes every night. You had already said once, in your pain, that we weren't ready for children. That the world we lived in wasn't kind enough for them. You didn't mean to hurt me, but you did, and I believed you. So, I made the choice alone. Hope was born in a small birthing center surrounded by lavender fields and morning mist. I stayed with her for 6 months. 6 beautiful months of midnight lullabies and quiet joy. But I was terrified. I thought if I brought her back, you might see her as a burden. That she might become a source of guilt instead of love. So I found someone I trusted, a kind woman named Colette, a retired nurse, and I left Hope in her care. I sent money. I checked in often. I planned to bring her back when things settled. But the years slipped by faster than I could hold them. Leonard stood up suddenly, pacing the study like a caged animal, the letter dangling in one hand. He couldn't breathe. The walls of the room closed in. The fire crackled mockingly, echoing the spark that had just exploded inside him. Amelia had a child, his child, and she never told him. All those years, all those moments when they could have been a family, when his arms were empty and aching and he didn't know why, she knew. And still, she had kept Hope hidden. But why? Why carry that weight alone? He dropped into the leather chair again and continued reading. Colette passed away 2 years ago. I tried to bring Hope home, I did. But that's when the doctors told me about the blood clot. The headaches, the dizzy spells. I knew. I didn't want to die with this lie. If something happens to me, Leo, please find her. She's so much like you. Quiet, thoughtful, fierce in ways she doesn't understand. She has your eyes when she's angry and my stubbornness when she wants an extra cookie. You will love her, even if you don't believe it right now. She's the best part of me. Of us. Forgive me. Amelia. Leonard stared at the final line until the ink blurred through his tears. Forgive her? Could he? Could he forgive the woman he loved more than life for hiding something so sacred, for keeping his daughter from him? But even through the anger, even through the betrayal, another truth pulsed beneath the surface. Hope was his daughter. His. Alive. In this house. Sleeping in her mother's room. Leonard stood up and walked to the tall windows overlooking the garden. The moon cast silver ribbons across the ground, the wind rustling through the rose bushes Amelia had once tended with bare hands. And suddenly he saw her. Not Amelia, Hope. She was standing at the edge of the garden, barefoot in the grass, staring up at the moon, her hair dancing in the wind. He rushed to the door, flung it open, and stepped into the cold. Hope, he called. She turned slowly, moonlight catching her tear-streaked face. I heard her, she whispered. She was singing again. Leonard dropped to his knees in the grass before her, breathless, undone. He took her face gently in his hands. You're mine, he whispered. You're my daughter. Hope's lips trembled. I know. and she wrapped her tiny arms around his neck, and he held her as if the world had finally started to make sense again. But as they embraced under the stars, Leonard didn't see the shadow watching them from the trees. A figure with familiar eyes. Someone who knew Amelia too. The embrace between Leonard and Hope was sacred, the kind that doesn't require words. It was love reclaiming its place after being buried under years of silence and sorrow. The wind whispered through the branches as if nature itself was holding its breath. But the moment, so fragile and pure, was not alone. From the edge of the garden, where sycamores thickened into a thin forest that framed the estate, a figure stood still. Half hidden by shadow, he watched with narrowed eyes and clenched fists. He had been there longer than either of them knew. Long enough to see the girl's face and recognize it. Leonard felt it too, not at first, but a second too late. That eerie sensation of being watched crept up the back of his neck like cold fingers. He pulled back from Hope slowly and turned his head toward the trees. "Hope," he said gently, "go inside now, sweetheart. Tell Mrs. Dunley to stay with you." She looked up at him, alarmed by the change in his voice. "Why?" "Because I asked you to," he said, forcing a smile. She hesitated, then obeyed, running lightly back across the garden, cardigan flapping like wings behind her. Leonard remained kneeling a moment longer, then stood, his sharp gaze locked on the tree line. "Who's there?" he called. Silence. The branches rustled again, but this time it wasn't the wind. A man stepped forward slowly, deliberately. He wore a black coat, weathered boots, and a cap pulled low over his brow. His face was rugged, unshaven, with eyes as cold as steel and a crooked scar running from his temple to his cheekbone. Leonard's fists clenched instinctively. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer right away. He took a few more steps, then stopped at the edge of the moonlight. "I wondered when you'd finally look at that letter," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Took you long enough?" Leonard narrowed his eyes. "You know about the letter?" "I know everything Amelia kept from you. I was there the day Hope was born. I cut the cord myself." Leonard's heart stuttered. "That's impossible. Who the hell are you?" The man smiled grimly. "Name's Elias. I was Amelia's friend, and for a time her protector." Leonard stared at him in disbelief, mind spinning. "Protector? Of what?" Elias took another step closer. "Of Hope. Of Amelia. Of the life you weren't ready for. At least that's what she believed. You built towers, Leonard. Amelia built a heart. She didn't think those two could survive in the same world." Leonard flinched, the words striking deeper than they should have. "She had no right to make that decision alone." "No," Elias agreed, "she didn't. But she did what she thought was best. You think it was easy for her, watching Hope grow up from a distance, itching to bring her home. She cried herself to sleep more nights than I can count." And Leonard's anger flared. "And who made you judge and jury of my life? You had no place in this." "I had exactly the place Amelia gave me," Elias said. "She trusted me. Because you were breaking Leonard, and she didn't want to break you more." Leonard felt the fire inside him shift, from rage to regret. Deep, searing regret. He rubbed his face, trying to breathe. "Where have you been all this time?" "After Colette passed, I tried to take care of Hope," Elias said. "But she disappeared. Vanished one day from the safe house. I thought someone had taken her. I searched everywhere. But she came here, found you herself. Smart girl." Leonard turned to glance toward the house, where a warm light still glowed from Amelia's old bedroom. She followed her mother's voice, he whispered. Elias nodded. "Maybe she was always meant to find you. Still, you should know something." "What now?" "There's someone else," Elias said grimly. "Someone who knows about Hope. Someone who doesn't want her found." Leonard's body stiffened. "Who?" Elias stepped forward, eyes deadly serious. "Amelia had enemies, Leonard, people who didn't want her to keep the child. There were threats. That's why she went silent. That's why she ran." Leonard's heart thudded. "You're telling me this now? She was scared you'd be a target too." Elias replied. "But Hope, she's not safe anymore. Not now that she's surfaced." Leonard felt the earth shift beneath his feet. "How much danger are we talking?" Elias exhaled slowly. "Enough to make her vanish again if we're not careful." Leonard's hands balled into fists. "Over my dead body." Elias looked at him, testing the fire in his eyes, then nodded slowly. "Good. Because you're going to need help." Leonard didn't trust him. Not entirely. But in that moment, he understood something critical. Whatever the past held, whatever lies Amelia had told or truth she'd buried, the future of his daughter was now his to protect. And danger had just knocked on their door. The study was still heavy with the scent of smoldering oak when Leonard shut the door behind Elias and locked it. He didn't like the man, didn't trust him either. But something in his eyes told Leonard the danger was real. Hope wasn't just a mystery anymore. She was a target. Leonard paced in silence while Elias stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, his silhouette like a ghost out of a different life. "There's something you're not telling me," Leonard said, breaking the stillness. You keep speaking in riddles. What kind of enemies are we talking about? Elias leaned forward. Amelia didn't just leave to protect Hope from you. She was being watched. Leonard followed. Right after she gave birth, someone came to the clinic asking questions. Not doctors, not family. Men in suits, no names, no credentials. When she asked who they were with, they only said private interests. Leonard's brow furrowed. You're saying someone wanted to take her? Elias nodded slowly. Or use her. Leonard stopped pacing, heart thudding. Why? Elias hesitated. That's the part I never figured out. But Amelia knew something. She hinted at it in letters she wrote me. She said, Hope has something they want. She never explained more. But if someone was tracking her then, they might still be watching now. Leonard's chest tightened. Hope was just a child, innocent, wide-eyed, and unaware of the storm circling her. She didn't deserve any of this. Whatever secrets Amelia had buried, he would dig them up now, every last one. I need answers. Leonard muttered. He crossed to the far wall of the study, where an old oil painting of Amelia's grandmother hung slightly off-center. Behind it, embedded into the wood paneling, was a hidden safe. Amelia had insisted on it years ago. For family things, she'd said. Only for what matters. Leonard pulled the painting aside and knelt. His fingers hovered over the dial. What's in there? Elias asked. I don't know, Leonard said. She had the code. Gave it to me once, but I forgot it. Never needed it. Until now. He stared at the numbers, and for a moment, Amelia's voice echoed in his memory. You'll never forget this code, she had teased once. Because it's the day everything changed. The day everything changed. He closed his eyes. August 3rd, 2016. The day Amelia left for France. The day she said she was going to care for her aunt. The day she had actually gone to give birth. Leonard turned the dial 080316. A click echoed through the study. The door creaked open. Inside was a collection of worn letters bound in ribbon, a flash drive, and a small velvet box. Leonard's fingers trembled as he reached inside. He opened the letters first. Most were addressed to her sister, some to Elias, none to him. Each one revealed fragments of Amelia's inner world. Her fears, her hopes for hope, her regrets. One letter stopped him cold. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It was labeled simply, If anything happens to me. He opened it, scanning line by line. If anything happens to me, you must know this Hope's blood is unique. When I was pregnant, a genetic specialist noticed something, a mutation. Not dangerous, not a disease, but something rare. Her immune system, it adapts faster than normal. She recovered from illnesses in hours instead of days. The doctor asked to study her further. I said no. Then he disappeared. That's when the men came. She's not a miracle. She's just a child. But to the wrong people, she's valuable. Leonard sat down slowly, the letter falling into his lap. He looked up at Elias, who now seemed heavier, burdened by things he'd kept hidden too long. She was trying to protect her from being harvested. Studied. Use it? Leonard whispered. Yes, Elias said. And now you see why Amelia did what she did. Leonard opened the velvet box next. Inside, a jade pendant. Amelia's necklace, the ivy leaf. But tucked beneath it was something else, a small locket containing a photo of baby Hope in Amelia's arms. The same amber eyes, the same solemn expression. Leonard reached for the flash drive last. He plugged it into his laptop. Hundreds of files popped up. Medical scans, blood work, journals, a hidden life. Amelia had documented everything. Not just about Hope's physical health, but her development, her abilities, her dreams. It was a mother's quiet obsession to protect, understand, and preserve her child's future. Even if that meant keeping her secret. Elias stepped closer, his voice low. There's more, Leonard. The men who were following her, I think they're still out there. I've seen signs. Leonard stood, fury and resolve burning in his eyes. Then we protect her. I don't care what it takes. Elias gave a grim nod. Then you'll need to move fast. If Hope's reappearance triggered anything in their network, and trust me, they have one, then we have days, maybe hours. Leonard turned to the window, his reflection staring back at him. Not the man he was a week ago. Not the grieving millionaire. Now, he was a father, a guardian, a man with something, someone, to fight for. And they were coming. Morning came dressed in heavy clouds and restless wind. The Whitmore estate, usually silent as a chapel, now buzzed with a nervous energy that felt too loud, too uncertain. Leonard hadn't slept. Neither had Elias. They spent the night poring over Amelia's letters and files, connecting the fragments of a life shrouded in secrets. Hope, unaware of the storm gathering around her, ate breakfast in the sunroom, a tray of pancakes and fresh berries in front of her, her little legs swinging under the antique table. Leonard stood just outside the doorway, watching her quietly. There was an ache in his chest that refused to fade, a mix of guilt, protectiveness, and awe. She was so small, so brave, and yet she had already endured more than most adults. She deserves a normal life, Leonard whispered. Elias, behind him, crossed his arms. Then we better make sure she lives long enough to have one. Leonard gave him a hard look. You said someone might already be tracking her. What does that mean exactly? Cameras? Phones? Elias nodded. All of it. Amelia taught Hope to stay away from devices, but one mistake is all it takes. If she was caught on a public CCTV near the cemetery or even pinged on someone's camera phone. Leonard's fists clenched. They'd know she's back. That's right, Elias said. And they'll come looking. Which is why we need to know who they are and what they want. I'm calling the private investigator I used after Amelia passed, Leonard said, moving toward his study. He's discreet. If anyone can dig through shadows, it's him. As he reached for his phone, Hope's soft voice called out from behind him. Daddy. The word hit him like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. He turned around. Yes, sweetheart. I found something, she said, holding up a small photograph. It was in the bottom drawer of Mommy's old desk. Leonard took it gently from her hands. It was aged, the edges curled. In the image, Amelia sat on a bench near a lake, holding baby Hope in her lap. But what chilled Leonard wasn't the tenderness of the moment. It was the man standing in the background. He was tall, wearing a black trench coat and sunglasses, seemingly mid-stride. His face was partially turned away, but there was something off about his posture. Too still for someone walking. Like he was posing. Watching. Leonard turned the photo over. A date was scribbled on the back in Amelia's handwriting, May 14, 2018. Geneva. She never told me she went to Switzerland, Leonard murmured. She didn't, Elias said, stepping beside him. He took one glance at the photo and cursed under his breath. That's him. That's the one who came to the clinic. I only saw him once, but I never forgot that face. He's older now, but it's the same guy. Leonard stared at the image, anger curling in his stomach. Then we have a lead. Elias took the photo and studied it closely. We need to find out who he is, and why he followed her across countries. And Hope, sensing the tension, held Leonard's hand. Is he a bad man? Leonard kneeled beside her. He might be, darling. But we're going to keep you safe. I promise. Hope nodded slowly, then whispered. Mommy used to call him the quiet man. She told me never to talk to him if I saw him. Even in dreams. Leonard's blood ran cold. She saw him in her dreams. Elias asked, shocked. Hope nodded again, and once, in the park. He didn't blink. Leonard stood. That's it. We're leaving now. If this man is real, if she saw him in person, then he could have followed her here. Elias didn't argue. I'll pack essentials. We'll go to the lake house. Off-grid. I built it for Amelia to escape when she needed space. No internet. No cell towers. No one knows it exists but me. Leonard nodded. Good. We'll leave within the hour. As Elias disappeared down the hall, Leonard turned back to his daughter. She was clutching a small stuffed bunny now, one ear half torn, likely from years of love and survival. It was then he noticed something tucked into the bunny's stitched belly. A tiny zipper. Hope, what's inside this? She looked up with innocent curiosity. That's where Mommy hid secrets. Leonard carefully unzipped the compartment and found a folded piece of paper. His heart stilled as he opened it. It was a sketch of a symbol. An inverted triangle, 3 dots above it, and a spiral in the center. Leonard had never seen it before. But in the margin, Amelia had scribbled something cryptic. They call themselves the Spiral Directive. If you see this symbol, run. He stared at the sketch, his fingers trembling. The spiral pulsed in the ink like an open eye. Elias returned, saw the symbol, and went white. Where did you get that? He asked. Leonard held it up. From her toy. Elias looked him dead in the eye. I've seen it before, once, carved into a door in a lab outside Prague. And if that group is involved, then we're dealing with something far bigger than just Hope. Leonard took Hope's hand in his. What are they? He asked quietly. Elias replied without hesitation. They're not just after her blood. They're after control. The road leading to the lake house twisted like a serpent through pine-covered hills, each curve devouring a bit more of the outside world. Rain tapped against the windshield like impatient fingers as Leonard drove in silence, his hand steady on the wheel but his thoughts spiraling. Hope slept in the back seat, bundled beneath a wool blanket, clutching her stuffed bunny like it held the world together. Elias sat in the passenger seat, constantly checking the side mirrors. His eyes scanned the darkening horizon, every tree a possible threat, every passing car a shadow that lingered too long. We're almost there, Elias muttered, nodding toward a turnoff marked by nothing more than a rusted mailbox and a narrow gravel path. Stay slow. This place wasn't meant to be found. Leonard made the turn. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as the trees grew taller and closer. It felt like driving into a dream, or a memory. After nearly 20 minutes, the trees opened to reveal a clearing with a single, weather-worn cabin sitting on the edge of a silver lake. Mist hung low over the water like a sleeping ghost. The cabin, built from rough timber and crowned with a mossy roof, looked as though it had grown out of the earth itself. Leonard parked beside it and turned off the engine. The silence was sudden and absolute. Only the rain and the wind dared make a sound. Hope stirred, blinking slowly. Are we safe now? Leonard reached back, brushing her curls away from her eyes. Yes, sweetheart. We're safe. But he didn't fully believe his own words. Elias stepped out first, unlocking the heavy front door. Solar power, wood-burning stove, filtered well water, no cell signal, no internet. The safest place we've got. They stepped inside to find a space frozen in time. A faded rug stretched across the wooden floor, and a stone fireplace dominated one wall. The air smelled of cedar and old books. The kitchen was small but warm, lined with copper pots and a kettle that still sat on the stove, waiting for a flame. This was hers, Leonard said softly, his voice catching. Elias nodded. Her sanctuary. When everything got too loud, this is where she came. Leonard helped Hope settle into the smaller bedroom with a view of the lake. She pressed her face against the window and whispered, It's so quiet here. Like the trees are watching. He tucked her in gently, placing her bunny beside her pillow. That's because they are, he said, smiling softly. But they're friendly trees. She smiled, her eyes already drifting shut. Leonard left her door open a crack, then returned to the main room where Elias was building a fire. Sparks crackled in the hearth, slowly breathing life into the room. We need to talk about that symbol, Leonard said. Elias nodded grimly. The Spiral Directive. Leonard sat across from him, hands clasped. You said you saw it in a lab, outside Prague, 5 years ago, Elias said. Amelia sent me there. She'd intercepted a strange letter. A report detailing a child subject with a revolutionary immune profile. They never used names, only symbols. And that spiral was stamped at the top of every page. Leonard frowned. A secret medical group. More than that. A private conglomerate. Think pharmaceutical giants, militarized research, government exiles. A Frankenstein of profit and power. No official records, no headquarters. They disappear like vapor. Leonard rubbed his temples. Why go after a child? Because she's a biological miracle? Elias said, his voice low. To you, she's your daughter. To them, she's a patent. Silence hung thick in the room. They would experiment on her. Leonard asked, his voice like gravel. They would clone her. Weaponize her? Maybe worse? A beat passed before Leonard said, Then we disappear. Elias looked at him carefully. It's not that simple. I can buy identities. Relocate us. I'll vanish off every grid that exists. And what happens when Hope turns 15, 18? What if her body changes again? What if her abilities grow? Leonard stared at the fire. Then I'll deal with it. But no one is taking her? Elias stood pacing. We need leverage. Something to use against them. Leonard remembered the files from the flash drive. There were journal entries, test results. Maybe something we can leak. Too dangerous. If we go public, we invite them to finish what they started. We need something bigger. Something they want, or fear. Just then, a gust of wind slammed against the cabin, rattling the windows. Elias reached for the rifle he'd placed by the door. Leonard stood slowly. Was that? Elias raised a hand. Stay here. He stepped out onto the porch, scanning the trees, the edge of the lake. Leonard followed, heart thundering. Nothing moved. But then, on the far side of the clearing, a single object lay on the wet ground. A silver pendant, shaped like an eye. Elias picked it up carefully, his jaw tightening. This is theirs. Leonard's blood ran cold. They know where we are. The pendant glinted cold in Elias's palm, rainwater dripping from its surface like tears from metal. Leonard stared at it, paralyzed. It was unmistakably deliberate, not lost, not dropped. It had been placed in the clearing like a signature. A message. We found you. Leonard's fists clenched as he looked toward the cabin, where Hope slept unaware. For a brief moment, the soft orange glow behind the frosted window seemed like the only warm light in the world. They're here, he whispered. Elias tucked the pendant into his coat. They won't make a move tonight. That's not how they operate. They'll observe, wait for weakness. Leonard gritted his teeth. Then we won't give them one. They re-entered the cabin, locking the doors, checking the windows. Elias moved like a soldier, scanning each blind spot, every vulnerable angle. Leonard followed, adrenaline burning away fatigue. I should have brought armed security. Leonard muttered. We should have been ready. No, Elias said flatly. Security firms can be bought, bribed, watched. This place only stays safe because no one knows it exists. Or didn't. Leonard moved to the study alcove and pulled open the drawer of a desk where Amelia used to write. Hidden beneath loose pages of poetry was something Leonard hadn't touched in years. His father's old revolver. Loaded, untouched since the night Amelia died. He turned it in his hand, the weight of it suddenly terrifying and necessary. I'll take the first watch, he said. Elias nodded, placing a hunting knife beside the hearth. I'll sleep light. They both knew it wasn't enough. Knives and revolvers against ghosts who could bend governments. But it was all they had. Leonard sat in the old armchair, the revolver on his thigh, staring into the fire, every sound amplified. The ticking of the grandfather clock, The wind skimming over the roof, the creak of old beams settling. For the first time in years, fear tasted real, tangible, and it wasn't for himself, it was for her. 20:47 a.m. A faint creak. Leonard's eyes snapped open. It wasn't the wind. He could feel it, movement, calculated and cautious. He rose without sound, revolver in hand, and stepped down the hallway. Hope's bedroom door was still cracked. The nightlight inside glowed softly. He moved closer, heart pounding. And then he saw it. The window was open. His breath hitched. No shattered glass, no forced frame. Just open, gently, precisely. He burst into the room. Hope, an empty bed. Panic rose in his chest like a scream. The blanket was crumpled, the bunny on the floor. Leonard backed out, checking the hallway, the closets, the kitchen. Nothing. He sprinted outside barefoot into the icy wind, calling her name. Hope. Then he heard it. A small, muffled sob. From the trees, he ran. Branches scratched his face, thorns tugged at his shirt, but he didn't stop. He followed the sound deeper into the woods until he saw a flicker of movement near the base of an old cedar tree. Hope. She was crouched, hugging her knees, her body shaking. A dark shape stood over her. A man in black, his face hidden behind a mask with a spiral symbol on the forehead. Leonard didn't think. He raised the revolver with shaking hands. Let her go. The man didn't flinch. Instead, he crouched, whispering something into Hope's ear. She looked frozen, dazed, as if in a trance. Leonard fired. The shot cracked like thunder. The man ducked and bolted into the trees, vanishing like smoke. Leonard ran to Hope, dropping to his knees. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? She blinked slowly, then collapsed into his arms. He said he was going to take me to Mamiwa. Leonard held her tighter than he'd ever held anything. No one is taking you anywhere. Behind them, Elias appeared, rifle slung over his shoulder, breath steaming in the cold. I saw him, he said grimly. He wasn't alone. There's at least 3. Leonard stood, still clutching Hope. They came inside, took her without a sound. Elias looked around, scanning the trees. They're testing us, trying to see how close they can get. Next time they won't run. Leonard's jaw tightened. Then we don't wait for next time. Back at the cabin, Elias bolted the windows and began setting up traps around the perimeter. Tripwires, bells, even crude spike snares. Leonard tended to Hope, checking her pulse, her eyes, her breath. She lay on the couch, weak but unharmed, her voice barely a whisper. He said Mommy isn't dead, just asleep. Leonard froze. What did you say? Hope blinked slowly. He said she's not gone. They're keeping her. That she made a deal and broke it. Leonard felt the air drain from his lungs. Amelia's dead, he whispered more to himself than to Hope. But Hope stared at him with tear-filled certainty. I heard her, Daddy. I heard her calling for me. Leonard turned to Elias. Elias's face had gone pale. You told me she died in her sleep, Leonard said. She did, Elias replied. But his voice betrayed him. Leonard's heart skipped. Didn't she? Elias didn't answer. Instead, he looked away, and in that instant Leonard knew there was something about Amelia's death he had never been told. The fire crackled low, casting restless shadows on the log walls. Hope slept curled on the couch, her face calm now, yet her small fingers remained tightly clutched around her bunny. The light of dawn had not yet arrived, and in that ghostly space between night and morning, the world felt eerily suspended, like it was holding its breath. Leonard stood across the room, arms folded tightly, gaze fixed on Elias. You lied, he said, his voice cold and level. You told me she died in her sleep, peacefully. But you knew more? Elias didn't deny it. He sat at the table, hands laced together, eyes downcast. He looked older now, not in body, but in spirit, as if something in him had aged years in just hours. I did what I thought was right, Elias said. To protect you. To protect Hope. Leonard slammed his hand against the table. Protect me from what? The truth. Elias finally looked up, and for the first time, Leonard saw something he hadn't expected. Guilt. Deep, soul-crushing guilt. She wasn't supposed to die, Leonard, he said. Not then. Not like that? Leonard stared at him, heart pounding. Start talking. Everything, from the beginning. Elias took a breath like a man about to dive into a storm. 3 years ago, Amelia came to me, said she'd been contacted again. The Spiral Directive had found her, and this time they weren't asking. They were demanding. They had medical files, genetic data, proof of Hope's existence. They wanted her for further study. Leonard's fists clenched. Why didn't she come to me? She thought you'd try to go public. She thought you'd take it to the authorities, but they weren't interested in negotiations. They wanted leverage. So, Amelia made them an offer. Leonard blinked. What kind of offer? Elias swallowed hard. Herself. In exchange for Hope's anonymity. Her life for her daughter's freedom. No. Leonard shook his head, stepping back like the words had struck him. That doesn't make sense. She was sick. She was dying. She told you that, Elias said gently. But it wasn't the truth. The blood clot, the migraines. It was all staged. False medical records, prescribed symptoms. She orchestrated it to buy time. To convince you and the world that she was already fading, so her disappearance wouldn't raise questions. Leonard stared at him, breath caught in his chest. She faked her death? He whispered. Elias's voice broke. She gave herself up, walked into their hands willingly, and made me promise not to tell you. Not until you found hope and were ready. Leonard gripped the back of a chair to steady himself. The room seemed to sway. Where is she now? He asked, barely able to speak the words. I don't know, Elias said, pain thick in his throat. They took her. Somewhere off-grid. I've spent the last 3 years trying to trace them, but they leave no trail. No footprints. Just the symbol. Leonard's voice rose, a tremor of rage and desperation. You let the woman I loved, the mother of my child, sacrifice herself, and you did nothing? I did everything I could, Elias snapped. You think I didn't try to stop her? That I didn't follow every lead, bribe every guard, hack every satellite? I begged her not to do it, but she said it was the only way to keep hope out of a cage. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Leonard sank into a chair across from Elias, burying his face in his hands. His mind raced through memories now tainted with 1,000 what-ifs. The night she said goodbye but didn't cry. The final letter she'd written but never sent. The music box that Hope had known, because she'd been in that room before. Why now? Leonard asked quietly. Why show themselves now? If they had Amelia, why come for Hope again? Elias's voice was low, deadly serious. Because Amelia broke the deal. Leonard looked up, eyes wide. She escaped. Elias nodded. Or tried to. That's why they're panicking. They lost control. If Amelia's alive and Hope's resurfaced, they think a reunion might expose them. They want to cut the thread before it ties together. Leonard stood abruptly, his voice firm and full of new fire. Then we find her. We get Amelia back. That's not easy, Elias warned. They'll have moved her, buried her deeper than before. We have a child who hears her in dreams, Leonard said, turning to the sleeping form of Hope. A child who says her mother is calling her. That's not coincidence. That's a bond. Elias followed his gaze. You think Hope's abilities go beyond biology? I don't know, Leonard whispered, but I believe her. And if there's even a chance, even a flicker of possibility, that Amelia is alive and reaching out, then I'll tear down the sky to find her. Elias rose, a quiet intensity in his voice. Then we don't wait anymore. I know one last place, a black site, abandoned, not officially tied to Spiral, but Amelia once circled it on a map. We head there at nightfall. Leonard nodded, the decision already made in his bones. He looked at the fire, at the revolver, at the pendant with the spiral, and then back at his sleeping daughter. They took the woman he loved. They threatened the girl who carried his soul. And now, they would learn what a father's fury really meant. The road to Black Hollow was a path seldom traveled, a forgotten trail carved into the backbone of the mountains, choked by roots and mist. No signs, no GPS, just memory and instinct. Elias drove with laser focus, his knuckles white on the wheel, the forest clawing at the edges of the SUV's headlights. Leonard sat beside him, a storm behind his eyes. He wasn't the man who had once built empires from boardrooms and deals. That man had been buried beneath grief, betrayal, and now, a growing flame of vengeance. This man was something else entirely. A father prepared to face hell to reclaim what was stolen. Hope slept in the back seat, bundled beneath thick blankets, her face illuminated by moonlight streaking through the glass. Her bunny sat beside her, still zipped with secrets, her dreams restless. She's been twitching in her sleep, Leonard murmured. Like something's pulling her. Elias didn't look away from the road. She's sensing what's ahead. I've seen it before. Gifted children, bonded to trauma. They don't dream like we do. Leonard turned to look at her again. She's the reason Amelia's still alive. She knows it, feels it. Then we better not fail her, Elias said grimly. We're close. The vehicle crept up a narrow incline, wheels crunching dead pine needles. Then, through the trees, the structure emerged. Black Hollow. It wasn't a building anymore. More like a ruin of secrecy and sin. A sprawling concrete facility, mostly underground, now overtaken by moss and decay. Faded hazard signs, cracked surveillance domes, and rusted metal doors marked a place once alive with sterile cruelty. Whatever this had once been, it was long abandoned, at least on the surface. Are we sure this is it? Leonard asked. Elias parked in the cover of trees and popped the trunk. Inside were supplies. 2 pistols, flashlights, rope, bolt cutters, and an EMP grenade Elias had bartered from a black market dealer in Kiev. If she's anywhere, Elias said, handing Leonard a weapon, it's here. Spiral always leaves ghosts in their graveyards. Leonard took the pistol, loaded it, and nodded. Then let's haunt them. They entered through a broken ventilation duct that led into the lower levels. The air was thick with mildew, concrete dust, and something deeper, something metallic and rotten. Hope stayed pressed between them, silent but alert, her hand locked around Leonard's. Each hallway was lined with observation rooms. Two-way mirrors shattered, beds overturned. In one room, a wall still bore faded chalk marks, height measurements of someone growing or being tracked. Suddenly, Hope stopped. She pointed toward a sealed metal door, her voice a whisper. She's behind that. Leonard's heart jumped. Are you sure? Hope nodded. She's scared, but she's trying not to be. Elias examined the door. This was reinforced. Likely only one way in. He slid the EMP grenade from his bag, activated the timer, and placed it against the control panel. Back, he ordered. They stepped away. Boom. A low electric shockwave rippled through the air, and the panel sparked, then died. The locks hissed, and the door creaked open an inch. Leonard stepped forward, pushing it wide. Inside, a pale figure lay curled on a cot, thin, weak, but unmistakable. Amelia. Leonard's world stopped. Her hair was shorter now, her face hollowed by time and pain, but when she turned and saw him, her eyes filled with tears and life. Leonard, she gasped. He dropped to his knees, gathering her into his arms. I'm here, I found you. She buried her face into his neck, sobbing silently. They told me you wouldn't come. That hope was gone? She's here, he said. She found me. Her Hope stepped forward, her voice trembling. Mummy. Amelia turned, and her face shattered into pure joy and heartbreak. Baby. Hope ran to her, the three of them collapsing into each other, a knot of trembling limbs and whispered apologies. For a moment, even the air around them seemed to hold its breath in reverence, but the silence was short-lived. Banged. Gunfire echoed down the corridor. They're here? Elias growled. They must have set a motion trap. He helped Amelia up. Move. Now. They ran through the corridor, ducking into tunnels as flashlights bounced in pursuit behind them. Spiral operatives. Black uniforms, rifles raised, swept in formation. Leonard fired behind them, his shots echoing like thunder. Elias dropped two with surgical precision. Sparks lit the darkness. Screams followed. Hope clung to Amelia's hand, guiding them like she knew the way out. This way, she cried. She led them to a maintenance tunnel, long collapsed, but Elias rigged a charge and cleared the rubble just enough. They crawled through, fire and shouting in their wake. They burst through the other side into the freezing night. The lake lay ahead, vast, moonlit, a rescue chopper in the distance. Elias had called in his last favor, but as they ran for it, a final spiral agent emerged from the trees, raising his rifle toward Hope. He dropped before he could fire. Leonard standing behind him, still aiming, smoke trailing from the barrel of his gun. Hope turned, tears in her eyes. You saved me. Leonard knelt. I always will. The chopper landed in a fury of wind and floodlights. They climbed in, ducking, gasping, weeping. Amelia collapsed into Leonard's arms, and Hope wrapped her arms around them both. Above the world, as the facility shrank into blackness, Leonard held the two people he'd nearly lost, and whispered to the wind, You can take everything, but not them. Never again. The spiral was broken, and the family was whole.
At his wife's grave, a wealthy man notices a little girl crying, but her tearful words shatter his world. What begins as a moment of compassion unravels a hidden past, a dangerous secret, and a fight for family against forces that would tear them apart. In the end, love becomes his greatest weapon, and his only salvation,